Hi, good, happy Lincoln's birthday or whatever, buddy. We're going to go over something real quick that you're definitely going to need to know in class on Tuesday. So, unless we understand this, we can't really move on to bigger ideas. Make sure you're taking notes on here. Your notes are going to be fairly visual. Um, you're going to want to track along in that paper I gave you. If you didn't pick up the paper, you can just create your own notes in your paper, in your notes as you go. Just make sure you're doing it using the graph. So you're going to have to duplicate this the graph a number of times. What I'd like you to title your notes is Demographic Transition Model. So somebody had asked me, oops, um, we showed this and it's like, are you always forever going to live in one demographic situation? And the answer is no. And in fact, this model, and remember a model, and you should definitely know this definition of a model, is just an abstract way of incorporating an idea visually. So we're going to look at the demographic transition model, which is going to show us essentially how every country has transitioned from a nascent beginning country to a larger population. And so this model is trying to predict how every country in the world, or every society in the world, has changed demographically over time. And in this case, we're only going to be looking at births and deaths. So this isn't about gender or economy or anything like that. This is just how the demographics, life and death, population have changed over time. So you've labeled this the demographic transition model, and basically your definition is this: how we measure population stages in different countries around the world. We categorize countries into four main stages, and in fact there's a fifth one that we'll talk about that is new to geography, and I'm positive they're going to put this on the AP exam because everyone's so excited. What I'd like you to do, if you haven't already, is create this graph, but don't copy down everything. I want you just to copy down as I talk and as I'm explaining. I want you to go through this graph one thing at a time. So I'm going to go through all the different changes, right? So only one slide at a time. You're going to go through each stage one at a time. So let's start with the first stage. This first stage is when you have an incredibly high birth rate. Notice birth rate's in blue. You have an incredibly high birth rate. Hopefully you can see my mouse. Actually, I think there's a little thing I can do. Oh, laser. Pew, pew. So you notice the birth rate in blue, and it goes up and down. This could be for whatever reason. It's summer or spring, and people are having tons of babies, and then something else happens, and people just don't want to have babies. So it's high fluctuating. I mean, it goes up and down quite a bit. And then this is the death rate. Notice the death rate and the birth rate kind of weave together, and that's because when a lot of people are dying, people tend to have a lot of babies. And then as people stop dying, people have less babies, and people start dying, people have more babies. Think of, in this case, stage one is a country you've never seen in the world. I mean, this stage one would be like tribal, almost ancient civilizations. There might be some floating around, maybe in the Amazon, or the deep Congo or something like that. But the truth is no one's going to really be high fluctuating anymore because of globalization. We've all spread out enough that these kind of random deaths and occurrences don't really happen. So stage one is high fluctuating, and you should just kind of zigzag your births and deaths there. Notice the total population at the bottom. You'll definitely need to understand how this continues to go up, even though everything goes down. But just keep that in mind for now. We're just going to look at the birth rates and death rates. So stage one is very high birth rates and death rates, and little natural increase rate or change. Basically, the population stays the same. It's bounded by whatever, the ecosystem, disease, war, whatever, or tribal war. So we don't have a stage one country in the world currently, but we know they existed. This is even like pre-Rome. I mean, really. Anyway, just know that it's ancient civilizations. Stage two, on the other hand, so remember, you're just following along as I explain. You're not drawing this whole thing at once. You definitely want to demarcate these stages, though. And you should be, using your visual learning, so you don't have to write down everything I say. You can definitely just draw what you see. I'm pointing at it. You can't see that here. Nope. Oh, I'm reversed. It's exciting. So stage 2 is what we call early expanding. And that's a population's first chance at really booming. And this looks like a number of things, but essentially the birth rate kind of tracks the way it used to. Society hasn't really caught on to the fact that less people are dying, right? And this population boom, this gap between deaths and births, is a boom. And you'll notice that this curve tracks almost with this curve here, but basically this growing population only comes when there's a difference between these two numbers, and it's proportional to that distance. Oops, sorry. So stage 2 is sort of the first advent of medicine or safety. This would be something like industrialization or even imperialism, where people start spreading out everywhere, so there's more space and people are having the same amount of tons and tons of babies, but the death rate has gone down for whatever, food security, lack of war, peacetime, or even medicine. Medicine is probably, the advent of medicine is going to be the biggest thing in stage 2. So is there a stage 2 country out there? Yeah, there are a couple stage 2 countries. These are going to be the places that you think of, non-developed countries way far out of the reach of globalization. So these would be somewhere like, what's a population booming country? Maybe that northern part of India, but not the southern part of India, or that we watched on the video. So this is a place where education and medicine haven't quite reached, so the birth rate is still very high, but people's death rate have decreased. So medicine has reached them, but education and stuff like that hasn't. So they're still developing. Stage 3, on the other hand, is where people kind of catch wise to the fact that people are dying, and the natural increase, it moderates. So we're still growing, but notice in stage 3, we're growing a little slower and we're starting to level off. A great stage 3 country, oddly enough, would be someplace like Mexico. So this is definitely arguable, and there's no list. So this is a way of talking about countries. But we often use Mexico as an example because Mexico is just really starting to get behind the 8 ball on education. And even though there are parts of Mexico where women are still not that educated and sex ed is not that well taught, there are many parts of Mexico where it is. So this birth rate is kind of decreasing as education and globalization and medicine spread. Remember those anti-natalist policies and ideas. And the death rate is really leveling out here. It's like we've done pretty much the best we can with medicine. No one's living to 150 still. The death rate is still going to happen. No one can turn it off. People are going to die. But now we're looking at more like natural causes and less like medicine. I should have done my hair. Anyway, we're looking at things of more like natural death causes. So that natural increase is going to start leveling off because this number you'll notice this gap right here is starting to shrink. So the birth rate is catching up with the death rate. So we start leveling off in our population increase. Stage 4 used to be the last stage, and that's essentially where the United States is now, or was 5 years ago, more or less. And by the way, because I want to use these videos in the future for other classes, of course, when I say 5 years ago, I'm talking about the year 2056, because it is 2060 now. So I can use these until I retire now. So I won't use anything that's outdated or would give any hint of where we're at. So stage 4 is what we call low fluctuating. And even though the population is crazy high because these people have stopped dying and it's up here, it kind of, the demographic momentum is still happening. The population stays here, but it's not increasing anymore. The United States is a great example, if you include immigration, of this, because even though we're technically having babies, the United States is a bad example of this. France would be a perfect example of this because they're at 2.0 or whatever. They're like right at the number that we think is good. So people are having babies slightly more than people are dying, but that number can maybe crisscross occasionally, or it's getting closer and closer and closer. And this is because as we know, as we educate women in society, and as society becomes more industrialized and more capitalistic, more people need to enter the workforce. And as a result, less people are having babies. When you make babies a choice, it turns out people will choose to have babies less often. So no one's having 35 babies anymore because, heck, that's too many. You start making choices about the number of babies. As education increases and birth rates decrease, they decrease because, well, you can choose to have the amount of babies that suits your lifestyle, as opposed to just, popping out babies because you don't know where they come from, which is sort of what happens in stage 2 over here. So we're educated, we have tons of medicine, people aren't really dying anymore, we're choosing when to have babies. These are tons of antenatal policies that could look like anything. You'll notice the population just kind of fluctuates, it doesn't go up. And this stage 5, however, stage 4 is at a zero population growth, a zero NIR, natural increase rate. And that's really important. It's some zero, by the way. So it's not like, oh, well, now we're in stage 3 because we grew by 1 person a year. It's kind of flip-flops a lot, depending on really weird things that aren't important to geography, but, interesting things happen and people have babies. War, etc. And now stage 5. It says stage 5 question mark because stage 5 is pretty brand new with Japan. Japan is the only and first country to kind of be in here. That's not only, we saw the other day, was Germany as well. They're the first ones where the birth rate has dipped under and stayed under the death rate. And so the birth rates are extremely low and getting lower because more people are dying. Population is shrinking. And as population shrinks, we know that it will, just like it expands exponentially, it will shrink exponentially. So as people get too old to have babies, now there's less and less and less and less and less babies as the population reaches that age. And those less babies can have less babies. So it'll really nosedive baby. But what you should know is stage 5 is a population decline, and we honestly don't know what happens next. The hope is that people, I don't know, technology. If you're a cornucopian, if you're not, everyone's going to die. You could be a Malthusian for a day. Anyhow, so here's what I'd like you to do. You walked out of the class with 2 graphs. All you need to do today for your homework is track those tables on the back, on the graphs on the front. We're talking about Mexico and Sweden. What I'd also like you to try to do, no, don't do it today. We're going to do it as a class tomorrow. Let's see, it says right here, go through as a class. So you just need to create those graphs of Mexico and Sweden. Just use the table and create the data on the graph. Makes sense? You guys are awesome. This was a pretty short, pretty painless video. Yeah, we're going to do this in class. We're going to talk about those graphs, and I'm going to make you choose. But don't choose yet. Anywho, it's a quickity quiz. That's the quiz? I shouldn't show you that now. So you're telling me if I didn't do this activity at night, I would not be able to complete my quiz, which would be a real bummer and an automatic 0. Hey, give me those sunglasses so I can look cool in front of my students. You're making me look dumb actively right now. I'm being recorded.
You're making yourself look dumb.
Don't talk. Do not ever talk during an online lecture. Oh, God, I'm going to get hit. Bye! Call the... Oh, yeah. Have a good